How's it going, everyone? Rosalind here. So Trails Through Daybreak is releasing soon in the West, and with a combined 300 plus total hours and 2 platinum trophies between it and its sequel, I have a lot to talk about. Now this is actually my second time writing the script you're hearing right now. My first draft ended up being much longer and wordier than I had wanted it to be, so I scrapped it. This one should hopefully be more to the point. But because of this, if there is anything you want to know more about, or just want more clarification on, you can always come hang out over on Twitch at twitch.tv/RosalindGaming, and I'll be more than happy to elaborate further. Also, I have already covered both the battle system and the orbment system for Trails Through Daybreak in separate videos, so if you want more explanation on those systems than what is going to be covered in this video, I'll leave links to those videos in the video description. Anyways, let's get started with everything you need to know about the Legend of Heroes Trails Through Daybreak. Trails Through Daybreak is the 11th game in the Legend of Heroes series and is the first game in the Calvard trilogy, consisting of Trails Through Daybreak, Trails Through Daybreak Innocent Sin, and finally Kai no Kiseki Farewell O Zemuria. Daybreak takes place 1.5 years after the end of Trails into Reverie, and stars a new protagonist, Vaughn Arkwright. Unlike past protagonists in which you watch them grow up and develop as a character over the course of their arc, Vaughn has already done this character development, and instead the player is told about how he developed into the character he is now, rather than watching him do it over the course of the games. Vaughn is a self-proclaimed Spriggan, basically a private detective/handyman of sorts that handles jobs for clients that can't go to the police or the Bracer Guild for their troubles. In actuality, much of what Vaughn does, or at least much of what you do as the player controlling Vaughn, is basically just Bracer work. In fact, many of your side quests come directly from the Bracer Guild itself. Joining Vaughn in Daybreak will be Anius, Ferry, Aron, Rizet, Kator, Judith, and Bergard, for a total of 8 main party members. However, in addition to them, a host of other characters will join the party temporarily as the story progresses. Not all of these temporary party members will be controllable, some will simply fight alongside you in battle as AI companions. Being the 11th game in the series, Falcom has decided to take a different approach with Daybreak when compared to previous entries that began a new arc. Unlike Trails from Zero and Trails of Cold Steel, which had fairly well-contained stories, Daybreak's story relies on knowledge of past titles and storylines spanning the entire franchise, making it a relatively hostile entry for newcomers. Speaking of being hostile to newcomers, and potentially returning fans as well in this case, we should touch upon the game's length, specifically as it pertains to dialogue, as well as its balance between dialogue and gameplay. You see, Trails Through Daybreak has the most dialogue in the entire series, with a script that is longer than Cold Steel 1, Cold Steel 2, and Cold Steel 3 combined. And yes, I have confirmed this. The Japanese first print collector's editions always come with the previous game's script, and so I currently have the script for every game in the series except for Innocent Sin. I actually went through and double checked this and yeah, it was painful to say the least. But it's not actually the amount of dialogue that's the real issue. It's the balance between dialogue segments and things that actually break up those dialogue segments. This is because Daybreak has no minigames, nor an evolving dungeon that you return to each chapter like past entries. The exploration that would always happen when traveling from one story hub to another is also not present in Daybreak. Instead, it has been replaced with cutscenes of Vaughn and his companions driving from place to place in his car. And while this does fit with Vaughn's personality, from a gameplay perspective, it can result in the possibility of going 15 plus hours without seeing a single combat encounter. Things do get better once you get to the second half of Chapter 5 though, as the final acts of the game do have a better balance between dialogue and combat. It can just be a slog to get there. So let's actually go over how Trails Through Daybreak progresses as a game. Each chapter will begin in the capital city of Calvard, Edith City. After the opening cutscenes for a chapter, a number of side quests will become available for you to complete, and upon completing most of them, the story will progress, eventually leading to the party traveling somewhere else in Calvard. These major story areas will play out roughly the same as Edith City, with introductory cutscenes, followed by side questing, and then main story progression. This continues for 2 to 3 endgame days before culminating in a story-related dungeon-y area with an accompanying boss at the end to close out the chapter. There is obviously some variation from chapter to chapter, but that is the general flow of things. One thing to note though are the side quests, as a certain number of them are mandatory in order to progress through the game, despite technically being side quests. Basically, each area will give you a number of possible side quests, and you will need to complete all but one of them in order to progress the story. So for example, if you are given 4 side quests, then you will need to complete 3 of them. Now you may be wondering why Daybreak is forcing you to do so many side quests, and the primary reason for that is definitely the game's new alignment system. or as I like to call it, the reputation system that is mislabeled and falsely advertised as an alignment system. So with Trails Through Daybreak and Daybreak 2, and as of the making of this video it is yet unclear whether or not Kai no Kiseki will have this as well, an alignment system has been added. Essentially, as you play through the game, every side quest will provide points towards up to 3 alignments: Law, Gray, and Chaos. In addition, side quests and even the main story will present the player with dialogue choices that can increase alignment as well. On paper, this seems like a really interesting system. In practice though, it's basically pointless. For starters, there are no repercussions for your decisions. No matter what quests you take, what choices you make, you will never lose alignment. The numbers can only ever increase. Second, there is only one decision in the entire game, and 0 decisions in Daybreak 2, in which your choice can actually kind of matter. And that one decision amounts to determining who joins you temporarily for half of one chapter, and the subsequent extra dialogue pertaining to who joined you at the end of said chapter. Outside of that, literally no decision matters. Even the ones that you may think are super important ultimately do not matter. The alignment system is basically a reputation system designed to give you the illusion of choice and consequence without any actual consequences. Alright, let's move on to talking about the battle system. Trails Through Daybreak introduces a new action portion of battle alongside its traditional turn-based combat. However, this action portion is very basic and is primarily used to set up turn-based mode. Basically, the act of running up to an enemy and attacking them to initiate combat with a preemptive strike that you used to do in past titles is now you running up and attacking enemies numerous times to initiate a preemptive strike. During action combat, all you can do is normal attack, charge attack, and dodge. You also receive fewer rewards overall due to the after battle combat rating being capped at a 2.0. Additionally, many battles in the game can't even be done in action mode. This includes story and quest related battles as well as boss battles. The amount of damage you deal in action mode is also significantly reduced compared to turn-based mode, making action combat highly inefficient for anything but the weakest of enemies. With all that said, what is the point of action combat then? Well, as stated earlier, it's to set up turn-based combat. You attack an enemy on the map multiple times to build up a charge. You then use that charge to perform a heavy or charged attack. This will deal damage to the enemy's break gauge, and upon depleting an enemy's break gauge, you can then hit the button to enter turn-based combat, triggering a preemptive strike which will deal some damage to the enemy, and also provide you an increased chance for your shard skills to trigger. Shard skills are new passive skills that a character has based on what quartz they have equipped. Some of these trigger under certain conditions, such as the extremely broken arc feather, which can trigger when casting an art on an enemy. Others can trigger when the battle begins, and some can even trigger at the end of battle. Shard skills are also only available during turn-based combat. As shard skills are determined based on equipped quartz, which quartz you have equipped on a given character is very important. Quartz are socketed into a character's Zypha. This is essentially the next generation of orbment device that is used in Daybreak. A Zypha has 4 lines: Weapon, Shield, Drive, and Extra. Weapon focuses on melee skills, Shield on defensive skills, Drive on arts or magic skills, and Extra for extra passives that trigger at the beginning or end of combat. Now each line can have up to 4 open slots for quartz, with the actual numbers differing per character. Slotting a quartz into a slot will give you a certain amount of an element to that line. For example, an EP1 quartz will provide 2 points of earth to whatever line it is slotted into. This system is very similar to the systems used in Trails in the Sky as well as the crossbow arcs, except without providing arts to cast. If you actually want to cast arts, you're going to need to equip an arch driver. Arch drivers are pieces of equipment that can slot into a character's Zypha, allowing them to cast arts in battle. Most arch drivers have predetermined arts that you can't change, but they also do have free slots that allow you to more customize what arts the character can use. You can get these arts as well as these drivers from shops, quests, as well as found in chests throughout the game. The final piece of the new orbment system is the Hollow Core. The Hollow Core replaces the Master Quartz from previous entries, and while similar in function, there are some very drastic changes. Like Master Quartz, Hollow Cores have innate passives that are gained as they are leveled up. However, these passives are not available at all times. In order to get access to these passives, you have to use the S-Boost function in battle, which brings us back to the battle system. Once you've broken an enemy and hit the button to initiate turn-based combat, you will, well, enter turn-based combat. You'll deal some damage to enemies, delay them if you have delay quartz equipped, and trigger any applicable shard skills from your team's extra line. Taking a look at the turn-based combat screen, we can see that our team's HP, EP, and CP values, alongside any buffs and debuffs that they may have, can be seen in the upper left-hand side of the screen. Of note, these buffs and debuffs also still show up under the character's models as well. At the top of the screen, we can see the new turn order indicator in all of its completely useless glory. Thankfully, this is vastly improved in Daybreak 2. Highlighting an enemy will present some information about them, with further details being available by pressing the trackpad. On the right hand side of the screen, we can see the new chain counter, and this is actually a very important feature of Daybreak's combat, as the average damage values of your characters have been lowered across the board when compared to past titles. But this is to make up for the fact that you can now scale your damage exponentially higher through this chain system. Essentially, anytime you hit an enemy with one of your party members, the chain increases, and the higher the chain count, the higher the multiplier. This multiplier then multiplies your damage dealt, and the chain is then reset whenever an enemy's turn happens. And so maximizing how many turns you get before an enemy gets their turn, as well as maximizing how many times you actually hit the enemies, is an integral part to actually dealing decent damage in Daybreak. Continuing on, in the lower left hand side of the screen, we can see a bunch of information. You can see the buttons to swap between different in-battle functions such as attacking or guarding, crafts, arts, and items, and then below that you can see the S-boost gauge I briefly mentioned before. The max S-boost always starts at 3 bars, and anytime you then use an S-craft, an extra bar is added to it for the duration of that battle. To fill up the bars, you simply deal damage or take damage, though there are also turn bonuses that can increase it as well. You can see when this is going to happen by looking at the turn order at the top of the screen, so I guess it's not completely useless. Small aside, you can no longer use S-break to have a character jump in and take a turn bonus from a party member or enemy. So if an enemy is going to have a guaranteed critical hit turn, they're going to have a guaranteed critical hit turn. Anyways, once you have a bar filled up, you can hit L1 to boost a character. Any given character can be boosted up to 2 times, and the duration of the boost is determined by whether or not you single or double boosted them. Boosting a character has 3 primary functions. First, it provides access to the passive bonuses of their hollow core. Unboosted, those bonuses are not in effect. Second, it allows the character to use their S-craft. S-crafts in Daybreak are more restricted than past titles in the series. In Daybreak, you need to be in the double boosted state and have at least 100 CP. You also no longer can use 200 CP on a single S-craft. This does mean that you can get 2 S-crafts off while boosted now, but don't get used to that, as in Daybreak 2 this is even more restricted, allowing you to only get 1 S-craft per boost. And then finally third, boosting a character will increase the chances of having triggered shard skills actually trigger. To the right of the S-boost bars, you can see a number of icons with percentages on them. These are the shard skills that can trigger based on the current action you have selected for that character. Boost once and they will increase. Boost a second time and they will increase even more. Depending on the shard skill, it's even possible to have this chance to trigger increased to 100%. A couple of other things you can see from this screenshot include the blue line and the white circles surrounding your characters. This blue line is actually part of a giant circle and indicates where a character can move on their turn. In Daybreak, you no longer need to spend an action to move and position your character in battle. Instead, you have free movement on your turn within this blue circle. The white circles are the new link mechanic. Instead of linking with a specific character, you now move a character next to another so that their circles overlap, and this will link them for that action, allowing the other character to perform a follow-up attack. The last thing I need to mention about combat before moving on to other miscellaneous things is with regards to difficulty. And for those who want a challenge, I have some very unfortunate news, as Trails Through Daybreak and its sequel are absurdly easy, to the point that it's actually insulting. There are a number of reasons for this though. One is just the relative power level of your party members when compared to enemies in the game, especially when using arts, as magic in Daybreak is hilariously overpowered. Another reason is the existence of Rosette, or more specifically her craft Cobalt Curtain, which can be spammed and essentially makes you immortal. But even if you choose not to use magic and not to use Cobalt Curtain, the game would still be absurdly easy. And that is because the only things that change between difficulties are enemy HP and speed values. Enemies don't deal more damage, they don't take less damage, literally nothing changes except that they act a little faster and have more health. That's it. For players that prefer to play on easier difficulties, this won't be an issue. But for those of us who want to have a challenge, it is truly infuriating just how easy Daybreak is, and that there is no way to make it more challenging. I should really move on before I get irritated just talking about it. Now that story progression, new systems, and combat have been covered, let's talk about some miscellaneous things. At the end of each chapter, you will still be graded, and given points based on criteria just like previous entries. And as you accumulate points, you'll rank up and be given rewards. Again, just like previous Legend of Heroes titles. Daybreak though now has an in-game achievement system where the bulk of your rewards will come from, such as new holo cores, special quartz, unique accessories, and more. If you are looking to obtain the Platinum Trophy, do note that you will need to complete the second half of Chapter 5 a total of 4 times. And you will want to be extra diligent when it comes to not missing items from vending machines, using the public baths in each new location, purchasing gifts for companions, and watching movies. This is because gifts, vending machine items, and public baths are all missable, and you only have a select number of times to watch movies with your companions. Pay special attention to Brigard as well when leveling your relationship with him. This has been adjusted since the Japanese release, but it is still possible to miss maxing him out even after 2 playthroughs. If you are playing on older hardware, be prepared for performance issues. A lot of this has been fixed, but the game ran so poorly for its Japanese launch that even after 16 plus patches, it still has issues on older hardware. Along those same lines, there are also still numerous bugs in the game that have not been fixed yet. These mainly consist of certain quartz and shard skills not working. Luckily though, there are no game-breaking or account-breaking bugs in Daybreak. The same can't be said for its sequel though. Finally, and I've touched on this a little throughout this video, there are things you can do with your companions to increase your affinity with them. This includes viewing their Connect events, watching movies with them, and giving gifts. Events happen at predetermined times, either during the afternoon or at night, both in Edith City and at the various locations you travel to around Calvard. Now you can't view all of them in a single playthrough without save scumming, and if you're going for in-game achievements and trophies, then even save scumming won't work. Movies are similar and can be viewed either during the day or night in Edith or select other locations. Which movies are available to see and who you can choose to bring with you is dependent on where you are in the story. And finally, gifts can be given to companions at any time, but they are finite and missable. You also can't buy gifts a second time on multiple playthroughs. Anyways, I think that just about does it for all the important things in Trails Through Daybreak. There was a lot to cover, and I'm sure I missed some stuff, so if you have any questions about Trails Through Daybreak, feel free to come hang out over on Twitch at twitch.tv/RoslinGaming or my Discord server, and I'll be happy to answer. You can find links to both of those in the video description below alongside my dedicated videos on the battle system and orbit system for Daybreak. Also, if you found this video helpful and informative, please be sure to leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. Until next time, take care.